Some people, such as myself, have become convinced that Christianity is true based on the evidence for the resurrection. Other people who have been exposed to the same evidence don't find it compelling. There can be many reasons why this is the case. Some people just don't want Christianity to be true and will therefore never be convinced. But others are more honest and reject the faith on intellectual grounds. In this video I will focus on the honest group. Why is it that some people are genuinely persuaded by the evidence and others are not? I think the answer can be found in a popular misunderstood slogan. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Atheist YouTuber Paulogia made a whole video about why he thinks this claim makes sense. I actually agree with much of what he said, but still I think that anybody who's intellectually honest should find the evidence for the resurrection compelling. Welcome to the channel, I'm Kyle de Lange and I want to help you see that Christianity is both reasonable and true. Paulogia suggests that the slogan makes sense, but it is important that we understand the meaning he gives it. Whether a claim is extraordinary depends from person to person. If somebody finds a certain claim extraordinary, then that person requires extraordinary evidence in order to become convinced. In other words, the slogan is about the subjective, not about the objective. Whether you think a certain claim is extraordinary depends on your worldview. Let's look at the claim that Jesus rose from the dead. According to the theist, who believes there is a God who made us and loves us, the claim that Jesus rose from the dead is not as extraordinary as it is to the atheist who thinks that nature is all there is and that miracles are impossible.
But consider person A. Person A believes in an all-powerful being, that this being routinely intervenes in the natural order of things, and that this being loves humans. For person A, there's nothing particularly out of the ordinary about this powerful being deciding to raise someone from the dead in order to demonstrate his love. But enter person B. Person B is open to the idea of an all-powerful being, but hasn't experienced anything in life they attribute to supernatural intervention. For person B, to have someone raised from the dead is not impossible, but would be well outside the ordinary.
Paulogia correctly shows that our worldview determines to a large degree to what extent we become convinced by evidence. This explains why a renowned New Testament scholar such as Bart Ehrman does not find the evidence for the resurrection compelling. He says the following:
miracles are by definition the least probable occurrence of an event.
If this is true, then it doesn't even matter what the evidence for the resurrection is. A natural explanation, no matter how unlikely, is always more probable than a miracle. If you have this worldview, then you could agree with the core historical facts concerning the resurrection, such as the empty tomb, the post-mortem appearances, and the sincere belief of the disciples. But you could always say in response, even though I don't know of any reasonable natural explanation, I still believe that there is a natural explanation, because miracles are by definition the least probable occurrence of an event. So how should we approach the discussion about the resurrection? I think it is important that we do not right away argue about the historical facts, but that we first discuss our worldviews. If the person you are talking to believes that nature is all there is and that the miracle is the most unlikely thing to happen, then no amount of historical evidence will convince him of the truth of Christianity. It is important to first show that his worldview is unreasonable, and that a theistic worldview makes far more sense. The view that nature is all there is called philosophical naturalism. Since a miracle is defined as an intervention of supernatural power in the natural world, it follows that according to the philosophical naturalist, miracles are impossible. Now, if the case can be made that there is not even a possibility of having a rational argument for philosophical naturalism, then there's no way that it can undermine the occurrence of miracles. Fortunately, there is an argument that completely destroys philosophical naturalism. It is called the argument from reason. C.S. Lewis in his book Miracles argued that if nature is all there is, then any thought or belief, including the belief that philosophical naturalism is true, cannot be rational. But if this is true, then the belief that philosophical naturalism is true is essentially unreasonable. Why? Lewis makes a distinction between reasons and causes. He gives an illustration with how we use the word because. This word can be used to describe a causal relation, but it can also be used to describe a logical relation. He gives two sentences to show the difference. Grandfather is ill today because he ate lobster yesterday. Grandfather must be ill today because he hasn't gotten up yet. The eating of the lobster is the cause of the illness, but the old man's late rising is not the cause of the disorder. The because in the second sentence describes the reason why we believe him to be ill. Lewis calls this a ground and consequent because. To be caused is fundamentally different than to be proved, and everybody intuitively recognizes this. When we judge a person's idea by saying, "You only believe that because your parents told you so," or "because you are a capitalist," or "because you are a Christian," we basically say that he has no good reasons for the idea, because we posit a causal relation that, in our eyes, sufficiently explains the origin of the idea. Everybody seems to believe that if an idea can be fully explained by causal factors, then the belief is not rational, because possible logical factors have become irrelevant. After establishing the difference between reasons and causes, Lewis goes on to argue that according to philosophical naturalism, everything can be fully explained by causes, which makes reasons without any real power or relevance. According to the philosophical naturalist, everything is part of the great interlocked event. All events are somehow causally connected, and therefore no event exists on its own. Events that cause other events. This is called event causation. A philosophical naturalist believes there's nothing outside of this. According to him, this whole system is causally closed. But think about it. This means that every thought you have, every inference you make is essentially not different from an apple falling from a tree. It's just an event. It is of course true that thoughts are far more complex than an apple falling from a tree, but complexity doesn't change the fact that it is essentially just an event that is dependent on other events. Our thoughts and beliefs are part of the great interlocked event. There's no free will, and everything we do and think is the result of some natural cause. The neurons in my brain just fizz around and give me certain thoughts and beliefs. There's nothing rational about this. If God does not exist and nature is all there is, then reason itself is an illusion. Evolutionary biologist Haldane, who was an atheist, said, "It seems to me immensely unlikely that mind is a mere byproduct of matter. For if my mental processes are determined wholly by the motions of atoms in my brain, I have no reason to suppose that my beliefs are true. They may be sound chemically, but that does not make them sound logically, and hence I have no reason for supposing my brain to be composed of atoms." From this it follows that in order for us to even take our own reasoning capabilities seriously, we need to ditch philosophical naturalism and believe that the supernatural exists. But maybe someone doesn't think that miracles are impossible, but that they are just the least probable occurrence. David Hume believed this, and he made the following argument. When a man who seems to be in good health suddenly dies, this isn't a miracle, because such a kind of death, though more unusual than any other, has yet often been observed to happen. But a dead man's coming to life would be a miracle, because that has never been observed in any age or country. So there must be a uniform experience against every miraculous event, because otherwise the event wouldn't count as a miracle. So based on the regularities we perceive in the world, we can conclude that a miracle is the least likely occurrence of an event. There's a reason why we have trouble to believe that someone rises from the dead. It is because we've never seen that happening. On the surface this might make sense, but it is actually just as unreasonable as philosophical naturalism. Hume assumes that miracles have never been observed. But how does he know this? He just assumes this to be true, and then he concludes it on the basis of his assumption. C.S. Lewis destroyed Hume's argument when he said, "Unfortunately, we know the experience against them to be uniform only if we know that all the reports of them are false. And we know all the reports are false only if we know already that miracles have never occurred. In fact, we are arguing in a circle." If your assumption is the conclusion, then your argument is terrible. Not only does Hume argue in a circle, his assumption has actually been proven wrong. Let's listen to apologist Sean McDowell.
In 1959, an 18-year-old woman lost her sight over a period of 3 months. In 1972, 13 years later, her husband prayed for her boldly. Over a 15-minute period, when he was done, she opened up her eyes and could see for the first time. Now, over 47 years later, she can still see. This story is documented in a peer-reviewed medical scientific journal. But it's only one example. In his 2-volume academic set Miracles, New Testament scholar Craig Keener documents that hundreds of millions of Christians alive believe they have seen or experienced a miracle. So yes, we have very good reason to think that miracles happen even today.
We can conclude that every sincere truth seeker should be open to the occurrence of miracles. The claim that Jesus rose from the dead may be extraordinary to you, but it is not fair that you see it as so extremely extraordinary that no amount of evidence could ever convince you that it's true. If your goal is to discover the truth, then you should follow the evidence wherever it leads. If a miracle is the best explanation of the historical facts, then it is reasonable to conclude that a miracle has occurred. Before I became a Christian, this was my mindset, and I was blown away by the evidence for the resurrection. This convinced me that Christianity is true. If you want to know why I think this, then I recommend that you watch my 2 previous videos of this series and that you investigate the historical facts for yourself. Thanks for watching, and God bless.